Hey, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to another Soulful Conversation with another soulful hero. My friend, my colleague, Rich Waitzkin. He lives in Portland, Maine, and he's a therapist, breathworker, among many other things. And it is my pleasure to share him with you. Welcome, Rich.
Thanks, Christian. It's great to see you as always.
Good to see you. It's been too long.
It's very long.
And so let's start. One of the things that I love, one of the things that I love about the work that you do is that you are combine traditional psychotherapy, or traditional in quotes, with breath work, that you weave that in. So talk about how that works and the effectiveness of that.
Well, I guess I want to start with apprenticing with you. And as I had to accumulate hours toward being able to practice independently, a number of things happened for me. And I think that's when I learned a tremendous amount. And the examples are my music would stop during a breathing session. Someone would enter the room, or there'd be some type of construction going on in another room. And for me, it was really learning that the power of the work could continue on even in a different creative way without the elements which I thought I was totally dependent on. And once I learned that just people breathing and hearing the rhythm of everyone's breath, no music, no drumming, no bells, really made me feel more trusting of whatever I could do to support the group rather than doing for the group. And the other thing was that there was a period of time when I couldn't bend, so I couldn't get down and dirty with the people that were breathing. So I had to trust that if I had energy that I wanted to direct to them, it would have to be from a standing position or a sitting position in a chair, something like that. And from that, then I became a lot more confident in using elements of breath work in my practice. And even if it was me just sitting and breathing more deeply in a session, that would have an impact on the quality of the session. And it was, it's all anecdotal, and I always smile about it because it was just so easy for me to learn to be present without a structure and include trust in that things would be fine. Certain clients also I've found really would benefit by having either individual or group breathwork sessions. And while I didn't provide that for all of my clients, I did invite maybe a third of my clients to join into breathwork sessions. And very, very powerful to use that in combination with regular ongoing therapy.
I mean, so much to unpack in what you just said. First of all, the one that jumped out at me was, because I had that happen to me once in the middle of a breathwork session. The power went out, and my computer at the time, the battery was shut, so it had to be plugged in, and suddenly no music, and realizing that it still worked, and how the power was not diminished because of the absence of music. Music is great. Music helps. It helps take you on a journey. There's an arc to it, all that. But ultimately, it's the breath that facilitates the healing that happens so profoundly in a breathwork session. So happy to hear that. I didn't know that had happened to you too.
It happened several times. I remember I have a metal bowl that I sometimes tap to begin a session or end a session. And while people are breathing, I walked over to the bowl, picked it up, and I just walked around tapping the bowl. People had wonderful experiences. So there's something for me about letting go as a result of breathwork training. And in general, the older I get, the more powerful that reality is, that I just have to let go, and then things happen.
Yeah, that is so true. And, I also get what you're saying. What the last thing you said was that how powerful it is to combine the cognitive understanding that happens through a psychotherapy, a talk therapy process, in conjunction with a breath work. Because I do have therapists who, as have you, sent people to me. And so, but talk a little bit more about that from your perspective. How does the breath work up level, facilitate, fast track the psychotherapy process? Add to?
Sure. There's one of my dear clients, a person that I really enjoyed working with, in part because of her high motivation to heal, her giftedness that she came in the door with. So we had worked together probably 2 years, and a bulk of the work was around her abusive mom, her emotionally abusive mother. And I identified her as a person who would benefit from breath work. And the work with her mother had sort of gotten to a place where the energy wasn't moving. And the first time she came to breathe with a group, she had a very intense emotional release, during which time I think Mother Mary arrived in some way to her. And as she wept for maybe 25 minutes, she forgave her mother. So I had a session with her on a Wednesday. We breathed on a Saturday morning. The next Wednesday, she comes in, Christian, and she looks lighter. She looks clearer. And we didn't have to do really much more work together on her emotionally abusive mother.
Wow.
She had healed and accepted and cleared and forgave. And then she moved on with other aspects of her life. So that really stands out to me as one of the success stories of the combination. It's a very overt one, and I think there are less obvious ones that have happened, some of which I may not have even been aware of.
Well, I love that story. That's a really powerful story, because we can all relate to that. And for somebody who might be watching this who doesn't understand or really get when you said the energy wasn't moving in the therapeutic process, what does that mean to you? Or can you elaborate on that?
I think that many of us resist. I'm not saying anything new, but we resist change. It's hard to open to patterning, the vibrational patterning that's not only it's in our central nervous system, it's also in our thought process. And when you get stuck in therapy, you're sort of going around and around and around on a topic. And there's not a lot of movement. You can almost I can feel in the room that it's almost like the energy around me and around my client isn't moving. And the power of breathing, the power through whatever mechanism, it can be exercise, it can be soulful breathing, it can just be deep breathing, but that really helps to shift that almost obsessional review and review and review. Once that happens, the person then clears and moves on. That's when the door opens for change or deep healing. Does that answer?
Yeah. And it also makes me think that you also offer EMDR, the tapping techniques.
Right.
Which I think the commonality between that and breath work, and we'll talk a little bit about that for somebody who may not know about tapping and how that works, is that it bypasses the mind, right? It bypasses the cognitive level understanding of remembering the relationship with our mom and what happened to us when we were 5 and how that resulted in a feel of betrayal, whatever the cognitive understanding was. And it goes to the source of the trauma, which now lives in the body, in the cells, and it clears it. So what would you add to that?
Luckily for me, I chose a therapist many years ago, thankfully, that was a trained core energetic therapist, trained with John Paracas in New York City. And so she informed me, and I learned through my work with her, that so much for me was of trauma or discord in me was lived in my body. And until I could move my body, I could intellectually understand, but I couldn't necessarily shift some mental constructs or where it lived in me, how it stopped me in a physical level without my knowing. So I always brought that into my practice. Once I learned it, I brought it into my practice so that my work wasn't just an intellectual sitting with the client and thinking and thinking and thinking.
And I love that. I love that you weave in so many different practices in order to serve the different people who may have different needs and different stuff going on with them.
Right.
So well, you said that you had shared, or that you guesstimate it was what, 30% of your practice with whom you had added breath work.
Right.
Is it the same kind of person that is also susceptible to tapping, or is it?
Well, I think tapping, EMDR, which is bilateral stimulation of the right and left hemisphere of the brain, and while it's not clear still after 40 years of this being available as a therapy technique, it does help to relax the central nervous system, which then allows that chatter that keeps us, that talk that keeps us stuck. It's Carolyn Meese referred to our intuition as, and the chatter as information we often don't want to hear, but we have to. And so the chatter ends up being a defense against what our gut is telling us we need to do or we need to listen to. And so the tapping, in a way like breath work, opens up the channels to move that energy, to welcome in new energy, new ways of thinking.
And what kind of results have you had with tapping? Like, would you, if you had a client come to you, would you introduce tapping first and then breath work down the road, or not necessarily?
I wouldn't necessarily do it first. There's a lot of other things that have to happen, most of which is about their trusting me to guide them through their process, through their healing process. So that happens much earlier. But I'm a therapist that often provides concrete tools and homework, and I think that's from my education background. So we will agree on something that they're going to do between now and the next time we meet. And tapping is a much more universal and safer type of intervention that can, I think, apply to anyone, can get the benefit of having that tool. People who are breathing, I think, need to have support around them. They need to be introduced to it. It's a different kind of thing than tapping. I think most people can do simple tapping themselves. Right. They can invite someone to tap on the back of their shoulders. And many of my clients are using that as a tool for managing their distress in any aspect of their life.
So it's something that you teach them how to do, and they can do themselves as they go through their lives.
Yes, I show videos, really short, succinct videos where it's taught, and I do that during a session. I give them the link to that video, and we practice that. A lot of people don't have an ability. It's surprising that they don't have an ability to do a right-left tap, that it's something from a much earlier developmental stage that pertains to their physical ability. They can't quite get that, but the more they do it, the easier it becomes, the more gifted they become in doing it. And everyone poo-poos it when I start. Everyone goes, not for me, I'm not doing that, that's silly, but they end up doing it. So.
Yeah, and the same thing with breathwork. In the beginning, some people approach it with understandable skepticism that, because even after 33 years of doing it, it's still hard for me to believe when I hear the words coming out of my mouth that the level of healing that can happen in really intense traumatic experiences just from breathing, and multiple levels, not just emotionally and mentally, but even physically. And adding to that, all of the other benefits of the connecting with some greater reality, like the experience that you were talking about, this woman and Mother Mary showing up in her case, and loved ones who have passed showing up with messages of healing and forgiveness that people so frequently report. It's hard to believe that all that can happen just from breathing, but it works.
It is hard. And I know from my own experience that for me to get to an opening of greater creativity, which I think the last 15 years has been about, or 12 years has been about, is I really had to let go of, I had to forgive myself personally about a lot of stuff. It wasn't about the other, it was about me. And I had to forgive myself, and I had to do some grieving. And then I found the creative energy began to expand, that it was that which was keeping me bound up. And once I was able to do that, and largely at that time through breathing, then I started doing much more creative things that I never imagined I'd do. It was always there in me, and it was there in me as a little boy, but I had put it away. I had said, no, I can't do that. That can't be part of my life. So that sequence of forgiving me, it's really like lighten up, Rich. You really did the best you could, and having some time to actually cry and grieve and moan and write, and then boom, opens up.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that was one of the other areas that I wanted to dive into with you, which is that whole process of creativity. Because you're so creative, it just beauty flows out of you, and you surround yourself. Your home where you live, it just pours out of you. The art that you collect, the stuff that you create, even your art in the kitchen, it all stems from that same source. So go a little deeper into that process. What was the connection between breath work and the creative flow in your case, and how do you understand that cognitively, and what can somebody watching this and watching this conversation, what can they do to unleash that creativity in them?
I think what happened, and it happened through breath work, is that I could no longer not honor it. Like I could honor academic excellence, or I could honor some other things, some volunteer work, or being a good friend to people. But this was something that I just said, it's there, but I can't honor it. And what happened through my process is that all of a sudden I gave myself permission to do it. And so the way it worked out is that there was a newcomer from Africa that opened a clothing store around the corner from my house. And the front window of her shop was horrible. And I walked in one day and said, "Can I be your window designer, please?"
You just walked in like you didn't know this person at all?
Didn't know her at all. And she allowed me to do her windows, which brought in more business for her. And it certainly made the walking path for everyone past her shop a lot more interesting. and I and then I started staging some friends' homes when they were trying to sell their homes. I would never have allowed myself to do any of that um, at all. And my garden was the same thing. My yard was the same thing.
Your garden, I should have mentioned that too. Your beautiful, exquisite garden. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And all of that became much more available to me, and was became much more of almost a daily ritual for me, that I had to support myself with that creative part. I could no longer not do it. I couldn't remain stuck in it.
So the connection then, as I'm here, what I'm hearing you say is that there was a connection between that creative flow and self-acceptance, accepting that within yourself, and that the breath work somehow allowed permission to happen, and then you unleashed it. Was that kind of the process?
Well, yeah, as I mentioned before, I think it was about forgiveness of self,
Hmm.
the grieving process, which I did a ton of with breath work. I remember one session with you, and you came up when people were breaking afterwards, and you said, "What was going on?" Because I just didn't stop weeping. I think all of that opened this up for me. And I liked the way that felt.
Hmm.
That felt nourishing. That felt more authentic. I think my humor shifted as well. Um, I wasn't bound.
Hmm.
I guess that's a good word to use,
Yeah,
being
I
bound.
love that.
And so I think what moves the individual, it could be writing, dancing. Oh, I started doing that too. But dancing, when you know it's part of you, you want to be able to include it. I don't think it's a choice. And how I feel badly for me that so many years went by, and that's what I chose, to not be connected to it.
Hmm. Well, the good news is that you did connect to it. And
Yeah.
and then you're naturally guiding me into the next area that I wanted to speak with you about, which is aging gracefully, because that you do that so beautifully, um, and you stay so connected with your friends and your loved ones, and in the community at large. Talk about that? How do you do that? How do you age gracefully? And what is the role of staying involved in the community? How does that serve?
I really love the words that you're using, and they are going in. I don't necessarily experience myself as aging gracefully, um, but part of that creative spirit that came out and has really influenced me is that I went back to working for the community, volunteering for the community. And again, this during the same creative surge time that I was doing windows and staging and gardening and all of that, I realized that I wanted to help the community create an LGBTQ plus safe center. Um, and I had wanted that for many years, but again, I had been bound up with this flow of energy. I then, during the same 3 week period of time, met with two other people who had the same idea. The synchronicity of it was totally amazing. Like suddenly, the three of us were all channeling the same inner desire. And that was in 2014. And we opened a small center of 3,000 square feet in 2016. And last June, we opened a 22 plus thousand square foot center for the community. Um, and it's been an amazing trip. And I think the aging part is that I've been aligned with younger people. I've
Yes.
become very close friends with people 25 years younger than myself, or even 30 years younger than myself. And they become friends, and they've opened the door to me, and I've opened the door to them. And that makes a tremendous difference in walking the walk of getting older.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by aging gracefully. I know people, Rich, who are much younger than you chronologically, who've sort of given up, and all they do is, stay home and watch TV and um, shrivel up. And
Right.
and you are so active,
Right.
both in your own life, in terms of the creative flow, in terms of your professional practice, in terms of your social network, and then this whole other layer of community involvement, which I think added a level of purpose. Because in my perception of it, you're still very purpose driven in your healing work as a therapist
Mhm.
and as a breathwork practitioner, but this just took it to a whole other level.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it behooves us all to remember community and to be part of community. And that's not easy to do. Uh, when you have some physical disability, when going out at night doesn't feel quite safe, there is a way to push through that and ask for help and still get out and learn from others. I think that probably is the one of the major keys for me, is that I learned so much from these folks, and I assume they learned from me as well. But I that's what's helped me, so that even in physical pain, I'm going to go to that meeting, I'm going to go to that opening, I'm going to go to that dance, because I want to be surrounded by that kind of energy.
And I think that's the openness that you're alluding to, and the open-mindedness of staying open to the possibility of learning that is keeping you
Mm-hmm.
young and alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a very surprising experience for me. I never imagined that I would be surrounded by a group of such loving young people and people my age. But the young folks, never imagined in a million years that I would be considered part of their cohort, part of their desired community. So,
And the benefits of that is so beautiful and warming for me to hear, because and the benefits of that are so multi-level and multi-directions, because in the same way that you're benefiting from them and seeing things from a different perspective, they are also benefiting from all your experience and your wisdom and all the stuff that you've learned the hard way.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're intentionally keeping these conversations short. We know how busy everybody is, and I know how busy you are too, which I think is part of the reason that you stay so young, um, in spirit. Maybe the body's a different conversation, but the mind and the spirit definitely impact that process, that the aging process physically as well.
Mhm.
Any final thoughts? Anything else that you'd like to share?
I, I I encourage people to uh, trust more that about taking the leap that you often speak about. That taking the leap, opening a door more than a crack, open that door more than just looking in, and actually uh, involve your energy, move the energy, is what a lot of this is about.
Mhm.
Because otherwise, I think we can get dulled, we can get stuck, we can get stagnant. And I don't think we're here for that at all. I think if we're really seeking an open heart and love directed toward our families and community, we can't get stagnant about it. We have to open the door, but it takes time. We have to do that.
I
I,
love that, Rich. What were you going to say? Were you going to add one more thing?
when you there's a statement that you make in your lectures of being called, that at this particular time you're called to, what are the words, how do you language that? We're called to.
Well, I mean, call to self-expression, at the maximum levels, called to living full-assed instead of half-assed, called to express whatever, or that unique human potential that only we are gonna express, and that this is it. Like, like if we have the slightest suspicion that we have work to do as healers, as teachers, as activists and promoters of change in this most critical of times in human evolutions, like this is it.
Yeah, I think your line is call to action.
Call to action.
We
Yes.
don't have a choice. We have to honor the call to action. And we can do that in small ways and medium-sized ways, and larger ways. But I think that's what it's about.
All hands on deck.
Yeah. I think that's what our religious leaders from centuries before us had in mind for us. Hard to manifest in this culture, but I think that's what it's about. Ultimately, what it's about.
And you're doing it beautifully, Rich, and you're such a fountain of love and inspiration for me. Thank you. I feel blessed to have you in my life.
And I feel the same about you. The mirroring has really been helpful. And again, if we are made in the image of something larger than ourselves, then we have to share that on a daily basis with those around us. And that's one of the things that you offer in your guidance and teaching.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate your words. And we're going to list your website below. So if anybody wants to reach out to you, they're welcome to do so.
Yep.
Thank you again. Thank you
for
sharing your time and your wisdom with us and your beauty.
Thank you, Christian. Love you.
Love you. Bye.